I wake up every morning at 6 and lie in bed for about 20 minutes before I get up. Not because I am tired, because there is nothing that requires me to move faster. No one expecting me. Nothing that cannot wait. I am 85 years old, and my mornings have looked like this for 15 years. I did not end up here by accident. I made 4 specific choices across 40 years that guaranteed I would arrive exactly here. I am going to tell you what they were, because I suspect you are making at least one of them today. My name is Ruth. I was born in 1939 in a small town in western Pennsylvania, the only child of a woman who ironed other people's curtains and a man who drove a delivery truck until his back gave out. It smells like hot starch, heavy steam, and the faint metallic scent of coal dust that settled on everything in that town. My mother was a woman of infinite silence and precision. I watched her move that heavy iron back and forth, erasing every wrinkle from fabric that would never belong to her. She taught me that being useful was the only way to be safe. My father was a man of exhaustion. I remember the sound of his boots on the porch at night, a heavy rhythmic thud that spoke of a world that took everything you had and gave back just enough to keep you coming back. I was raised with the understanding that if you worked hard enough and kept your mouth shut and did not make a fuss, something decent would eventually happen for you. That was the deal on offer. I took it. It is not a bad deal if all you want is decent. But I wanted something else, and I took the deal anyway. And that is where the trouble started. I was sharp in school, the kind of sharp that teachers comment on and other children resent. I was a girl in western Pennsylvania in the 1950s, and the path from top of your class to anything resembling a real career was not well marked. The horizon ended at the local mill or the kitchen sink. So I did what I thought was the next reasonable thing. I married a man named Gerald, who was kind and steady and had a job at the bank, and I told myself that was enough. Gerald was a good man. He was patient and decent, and he never once told me I was too much. We built a life together that was, by any external measure, successful. A house with a yard. 3 children who grew up healthy and polite. Savings. A vacation once a year to somewhere warm. But I was in there somewhere, underneath all of it, banging on the walls of that life, like someone who had been accidentally locked in a room that belonged to someone else. I watched the seasons change through the kitchen window and felt myself becoming a secondary character in my own story. I went to law school when I was 38. I studied at the kitchen table from 9 at night until 1 in the morning for 3 years. The only sound in the house being the hum of the refrigerator and the scratching of my pen against legal pads. In those midnight hours, I finally felt like I was breathing. I graduated second in my class at 41. I was a different person in a suit. I was precise, I was formidable, and I was finally occupying space that belonged entirely to me. That part I did right. But I made 4 other choices across those same 40 years that I didn't do right. The first choice, I chose approval over honesty for most of my adult life. Not in court. In court, I was a different animal entirely. I said exactly what I thought, and I did not care very much who liked it. But outside of court, in my actual life, I performed a version of myself that was more agreeable than the real one. I was a master of the polite smile that masks a scream. I smiled when I did not want to smile. I agreed with dinner plans I hated. I said fine when things were burning down around me. Women of my generation were trained for it the way some people are trained for competitive sport. We were taught that a quiet house was a successful house, even if the silence was suffocating the people inside it. Approval seeking is a very slow way to disappear. You make one small accommodation, and then another, and then another. Each one is a way of saying, I matter less than your comfort. But one day you look up and you cannot find yourself in the room. The actual you, the one with the jagged opinions and the raw feelings, has been slowly folded up and put somewhere increasingly hard to locate. I was 70 before I stopped doing this. I had argued cases in front of judges. I had broken liars on the stand. But tell my daughter-in-law that her comment offended me. Tell my oldest son he had been taking me for granted for a decade. Those things I could not do. I went home and ironed out my feelings the way my mother ironed other people's curtains. I called it being the bigger person. It was not. It was cowardice wearing a very respectable coat. It was a refusal to be seen, because I was afraid that if I were truly seen, I would no longer be liked. If you are doing this, I want you to stop. The alternative is to spend your life performing yourself for an audience that will forget you attended, while the person you actually are sits in a corner getting smaller and smaller until she is just a ghost in her own house. That is not noble. That is just a waste. The second choice. I chose to be needed rather than known. I was the person people called when things went wrong, not just my clients, everyone. I could fix things, and I did fix things, and I felt very important fixing them. The feeling of being indispensable was an intoxicating drug. I mistook the importance of being needed for the depth of being loved for decades. Being known requires that you show the parts of yourself that cannot fix anything, the parts that are broken, the parts that are uncertain and shivering in the dark. Being useful is an excellent way to stay hidden while appearing to be enormously present. I built a fortress of efficiency around my soul, and even Gerald, who slept beside me for 40 years, never really saw what was behind the walls. Gerald died 7 years ago. He died on a Tuesday afternoon in our living room of a heart attack that took about 15 minutes from start to end. I was in the kitchen making tea. By the time I got to him, there was nothing to be done. I handled everything that needed to be handled. I made the calls. I arranged the funeral. I was very efficient about all of it, and people told me I was handling it remarkably well. But I was not handling it well. I simply did not know how to handle it badly. I had spent 40 years being the one who holds things together. Grief does not care how many degrees you have or how well you can organize a schedule. It comes for you anyway. I had locked most of myself away so long ago that I could not find the key on short notice. I was standing in a house full of people who needed me, and I felt like a stranger in my own skin. After Gerald died, I spent about 2 years being fine. Not fine in the real sense, fine in the performed sense. And then one afternoon I was sitting in this kitchen alone, and I thought, what do I actually want? Not what does someone need from me. What do I want? 83 years old, and I could not answer that simple question. I had lost the habit of hearing my own heart. You think your utility is your value. It is not. It is a mortgage you are taking out on your own interior life, and the payments will come due eventually. Be less useful and more honest. Let people see the parts of you that are confused and helpless. It is the only way to be truly loved for who you are rather than what you do. The third choice. I chose busyness over presence for most of my life. I was always in motion, a shark that would die if it stopped swimming. When I was not organizing, I was worrying productively, which is what I called it when I turned my anxiety into a to-do list. I was afraid of the stillness. I was afraid of what I might hear if I stopped moving. I do not think I was ever fully present with my children when they were young. I was there. I showed up to the school plays and the soccer games. But inside those events, my mind was always running some calculation about what came next. I was looking at my watch while I was reading them stories. I was thinking about a brief while I was tucking them in. I was loving them from a distance, even when I was holding them in my arms. My youngest daughter, Carol, told me something about 10 years ago that I have thought about almost every day since. We were sitting on the porch and I was trying to organize her schedule for the holidays. She looked at me with a sadness that stopped me cold and said, "Mom, when I was little, I always felt like you were very busy loving us." She said it gently. She was not trying to wound me, but it went in like a nail, and it has stayed there. Very busy loving us. That is a love that feels like a task, a love focused on the logistics rather than the connections. I recognize myself in it completely, and I wish with everything I have that I did not. You cannot get that time back. When your children are small and your presence is what they are made of, the record is fixed. Stop being so busy. Put down the list. Look at the people in front of you as if they're the only thing that matters, because they are. Be present. Not occasionally. Not when things slow down. Now. The slowdown you are waiting for is not coming. The world will always ask more of you. Your children are not going to be small again, and your life is happening in the same hours you're planning to live it differently. Put down the planning. Be in the room. Actually in it. Hear the sound of their voices. Notice the way the light hits the floor. The fourth choice. I chose security over aliveness for far too long. This is the one I regret most, which is saying something given what I have just told you. I practiced family law for 22 years, and I will tell you honestly that I was fully alive at it for about 7 of those years. I kept doing it anyway because I was afraid of the fall. I was afraid that if I stepped off the path, everything would crumble. What I wanted to do and what I knew I wanted to do and never did was write, not legal briefs, stories. I had notebooks full of things I had written since I was 19. Fiction, mostly. Stories about women who made different choices than I did. Some of it was good. I know it was good because when I read it now, it surprises me. It has a voice I did not know I possessed. I put those notebooks away for 22 years because I could not see how to make it work practically. I told myself it was a hobby, a distraction, an indulgence. And then I retired, and I told myself I would write. And I did not write, not for 8 years, because by then I had convinced myself that I had missed the window. I thought the ink had dried up and the fire had gone out, and who would care about the words of an old woman anyway? I started writing again at 81, 4 years ago. I sat down at this very table, and I opened a new notebook. I wrote a novel in 14 months. I wrote until my knuckles ached and the sun came up. 3 agents wrote back. One of them said she loved it. We are working on it now, this novel, which I wrote at 81, which I began 40 years too late. I have never been more awake than I am when I am working on it. I feel a fire in my blood that I thought was gone forever. The aliveness you are postponing does not expire. It is still there, waiting in the dark. Whatever it is for you, the thing you have been putting off because the time is not right, it is still there, waiting. It did not get tired of waiting. The regret of the unlived life is a far heavier burden than the struggle of the lived one. Do not wait until you are 81. That is the whole message. Do not wait. I wake up every morning at 6 and lie in bed for about 20 minutes before I get up. I have 15 years of mornings that look like this, and I am making my peace with them one by one. But I want to be honest with you before I am done. I am not at peace, not entirely. There are mornings when the 20 minutes feels very long. When I lie there and think about the 40 years and the 4 choices, I do not wallow in this. I am not built for wallowing. But I do not pretend the thought is not there, because it is there. You have time I do not have. That is not a small thing. That is enormous. Use it as if you understand what it is. Make the honest choice instead of the approved one. Let yourself be known rather than simply needed. Be present in your own life instead of planning it from a distance. And do the thing, whatever the thing is. Do it now, while the now is still generous enough to receive it. I will be at my desk by 7. I have pages to finish.